All right, hopefully we are live right now, and I'm not just talking to nobody. Welcome to the Tarflower Chapter monthly meeting, virtual meeting. I just wanted to go over a few of our chapter announcements before we hand it over to Jennifer for our program this evening. So first of all, we and the League of Women Voters are recommending that you go ahead and register to vote by mail. I know I like to go and vote in person, but this year it's probably better just to go ahead and register to vote by mail, and that way you don't have to worry about what's going on in November. And unfortunately, we had to cancel our Green Isle Garden Day that was scheduled for July 18th. It just didn't seem like a smart thing to do right now, but we are going to do another one of our contactless plant sales. So stay tuned to the Facebook and we'll post some more details about that, hopefully in July, maybe the first weekend of August. And then I just wanted to go over a couple of our upcoming programs. Our August program is going to be the Florida Wildflower Foundation on August 4th with Lisa Roberts. We're still TBD. I mean, we would love to have in-person meetings, but we might still have to keep going virtual for the next couple months, but we'll let you know as it gets closer. In September, we have Amazing Ants, A Hidden World with Zach Prusik. And in October, hopefully we can have it in person. It's our regional chapter meeting, and it's going to be really cool on the ethnobotany of Florida native plants. And then we still have our Backyard Biodiversity Day scheduled at Mead Garden on October 17th. So that's just kind of the next upcoming months. Just wanted to let you guys know about that. And with that, I will hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I am so very pleased to be with you all virtually. One way that I am hoping we can have a little bit more interactivity with today's presentation is if folks that are joining us remotely are able to log in to ttpoll.com. It will direct you to a screen that looks like this, either on your smartphone or on your laptop on another browser. And if you enter that session ID of SJRWMD 72, it will tell you that polling is closed right now. But in just a moment, I'll have a few questions, and this will help us see what everybody's knowledge of our water resources are and some of the ways that you might be able to help one another and encourage one another to conserve water or to learn more about how we can protect our water resources. So again, I am Jennifer Mitchell with the St. Johns River Water Management District, and I am very pleased to be with you all. I am going to talk to you today about how the St. Johns River Water Management District works to protect our water resources and provide water for people. So our first question that we will see how many folks are able to respond with their devices. If you select how familiar you are with the SJRWMD. Again, if you are trying to participate in this poll, it is at ttpoll.com and the session ID is SJRWMD72, and that 72 is the year that we were created. So I see we have had one response, so that lets me know that the technology is working. But as a few more of you respond, those are that you work with us, getting permits through your work. You enjoy getting outside on district lands. And I hope that as a native plant society, that this is something that everyone does take advantage of. I will highlight a few of our properties and some of those plants that do occur on those properties. If you don't get our water news or follow us on social media, hopefully everyone that is participating in this opportunity today will follow us at SJRWMD. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a few other, whatever other social media platforms there are out there. You've heard about us in the news. That's always a good way to hear about what's going on. Or you've seen the name on your property tax bill, but you weren't quite sure what SJRWMD stood for. So those are some of the options, or you're really not sure who the St. Johns River Water Management District is. So I see that we've had a few responses come in. And so let's see everyone's knowledge. So there's some folks that work with us getting permits and some that get outside on our district land. So that's good to hear. A lot of my presentations, especially giving down in your area, may ask me, well, if you're from St. Johns County, what are you doing down there? The St. Johns part just throws people off a lot of times. So we are one of the 5 water management districts in the state of Florida. And my computer has now decided that it wanted to stop working for me. So we are one of the 5 water management districts, and it is our responsibility to manage the amount of water and that water availability for us, the people in our district, our businesses, as well as our natural systems. And when we're in a state that has over 7,700 lakes, over 11 million acres of wetlands, gets on average 52 inches of rain a year, and has the greatest abundance of freshwater springs, managing those abundant resources and balancing our need with those of our natural systems is a really important task. And so in order to do that, we have 4 core missions that everything that we do falls under one of these 4 core missions. And those are water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. And so today I'll touch on a few of these. If you're interested in learning more about any of these core missions, our district is hosting webinars throughout July and August, and our previous ones where we talked about each one of these core missions is available on our website, and that website is SJRWMD.com, and you can find them on our education page. So when we talk about that need for understanding and balancing our water resources, it's important to understand where the water in your house comes from. So we'll do one more poll and see if we get some responses. Again, that's at ttpoll.com, and the session ID is SJRWMD72. So where is that water in your house coming from? Does it come from a lake, a river, the aquifer, or I don't know? And depending on where you are, maybe you're tuning in from somewhere that is not within Florida or not within our district. I may not be able to speak specifically to where your water is coming from, but I can give a good indication of where most folks in our district, where their water comes from. So hooray, I love to see when people understand and know where their water comes from. So in our district, about 90% of the water that goes into our homes and is used in our businesses does come from the aquifer. It is the lifeblood to our springs, our rivers, and our lakes, and it provides us with the water that we utilize. And we often don't think about it as individuals that may be walking around above the aquifer. We think about it a little bit more maybe during the summer when we may go visit springs in our area and recreate in them. But on a day-to-day basis, we may not think about that water under our feet. So I'm going to give a quick little overview of what is the aquifer. As gardeners, you may have more interaction with those surface sands, and that's those surface layers of our ground. Those are going to be the same places that our surface waters or our rivers and our lakes are going to occur. But as we start digging deeper down into the earth, cutting through the profile of the ground, in some areas, we have this pink, or that's represented in this picture, confining layer. So those are going to be clays. And if you've ever held clay or played with clay, you know that the water doesn't move rapidly through that. And so this confining unit is going to be really important because it creates the superficial aquifer, or some people may have heard it talked about as a perched water table. So then in these areas, you're going to get a lot more wetlands. You're going to get surface water potentially pooling in those areas. And so if you have a shallow well or a surficial well for irrigation, that's what aquifer system that water is coming from. But in other areas of the district and across, actually up into South Carolina, across South Georgia, and even over into Alabama, and across the entire state of Florida is the Floridan aquifer system, and it's made of this limestone material. And if you've ever seen limestone, you've noticed that there are little tiny holes and much larger holes that the water moves through. So you may be thinking, well, where is that water that's in our aquifer system? Where is it coming from? And ultimately, the source of the water in our aquifer system is rainwater. So water falls and recharges the aquifer or makes its way down into our Floridan aquifer in these recharge areas, in areas where there is none of that clay layer. In Florida, it's mostly going to be across the Ocala National Forest in the central part of the state over into Alachua County, where you get a lot of those springs into the Santa Fe River Basin, all of that area, and then down into Tampa. The same area that you get a lot of sinkhole occurrence is going to be where that recharge is occurring. And we can't forget that the water in our aquifer is under constant movement. So it's moving under our feet and it's moving up into our springs, and that's that discharge. And so there is fresh water from the rainfall in our Floridan aquifer system. But if you notice deep down in the aquifer, across the entire Floridan aquifer system, there is also a layer of salt water. And so it's really important in managing the amount of fresh water that's utilized from our aquifer system to make sure that we're leaving enough fresh water in our aquifer, especially in those coastal regions. Because if we're utilizing more fresh water, there are times where we can cause saltwater intrusion into our wells. But by leaving more of that fresh water in the aquifer, reducing our consumption, we can keep that at bay. And then the last piece of this water cycle here in Florida is the way that we build, the way that we develop, the way that we landscape, which can increase runoff, which can change the way that water is moving in the system, and it can add pollutants, it can add nutrients, it can cause us to utilize more water from our aquifer for irrigation. So it's important to understand how we fit into this piece, but as well how we impact it. So have a better understanding of the water cycle, how it fits together, and I'm going to start talking about the different 4 core missions of the district. I'm going to start with our natural systems, because as a native plant society, you may be most interested in the plants that are protected on our district properties. So the district owns in over 700,000 acres of properties across the entire district. And if you remember in that map, it stretches all the way from the border with Georgia down to Indian River County, and then about halfway into the middle of the state. We cover the entire watershed of the St. Johns River, and then Flagler and, not Flagler, we do cover Flagler, Baker and Nassau counties as well on the northern side. Those natural systems are being protected by the district for their importance in flood protection, in some areas for the water quality benefits that they provide. Most of these properties that we own are currently wetlands, are historical wetlands, or are in areas that it's really important we protect so that the adjacent water bodies are not impacted. Some of the things that we do to help restore these natural areas are prescribed fire, and I'll talk a lot about that in just a moment. And 90% of our properties are open to the public for recreation. Our website is the best place to go to find out which properties are open at any given time and what type of recreation you're able to do on those properties. We do practice spraying of our invasive species so that we can really promote those native species and help them get a leg up in competing with some of those invasive species. I have a quick video talking about some of those restoration successes on our district properties. And so I'll let that play really quickly.
In addition to the land's water resource protection values and recreation, these lands are home to many restoration projects. Restoration projects have included harvesting seeds and planting a variety of native species to restore areas to a more natural state. Some of these restoration projects are focused on providing habitat for listed species. Most of the listed species in Florida are fire dependent. A lack of fire at the right interval contributes to the decline of some of those species. The benefits to ecological health, water supply, water quality, and flood control that district lands provide reflect on the overall land management program and the staff who care for these public lands every day. Training, research, and following best practices ensure that the St. Johns River Water Management District properties are under good stewardship.
So if you are interested in where our properties are, this is a map that describes those locations. I am going to highlight 3 of them and discuss some of our management so that you can have a little bit better understanding of what we're doing on some of these properties. So one of my first ones that I'm going to talk about is Julington-Durbin Preserve. I enjoy talking about this property because it has a really unique plant that we have been able to protect. It is also in a very urban area. It is right on the border with Jacksonville and St. Johns County, and there is development all the way around it. And so it's a really important property in terms of protecting the headwaters to these 2 creeks, the Julington and Durbin Creeks. So we are able to utilize prescribed fire on this property, and prescribed fire is one of the best tools that we're able to utilize to help with ecosystem restoration. Because if you think about Florida prior to people moving in, we go through cycles of very dry conditions in the spring, and as we start getting towards the end of spring and moving into the summer, we start getting these thunderstorms that pop up. And thunderstorms frequently come with lightning, and those lightning strikes would start fires. And if there weren't people, then those fires would burn as long as they were able to. And so a lot of the plant species and animal species that are found in Florida require this frequent disturbance. They require a really open understory, so decreased competition of plants shading them out, and they require this flux of nutrients that are available when the plant material burns around them. So this is one of our properties that when we purchased it, here you can see how it is in the middle of these 2 creeks, and again it is some of the headwaters to these properties where that water and ultimately goes out into these 2 creeks that are tributaries to the St. Johns River. So when we purchased it, it was in a lot of sand pines. And so this is a good reminder that not all trees are equal. So, and not all pines are equal either. So different plants, even though they may be adapted and do require fire, they don't require fire and have the same type of adaptation. So sand pines have an adaptation that they have stand replacing fire. So when a fire goes through sand pine, it will get very hot. You can see how dense they are, but they have what are called serotinous cones. That means those cones open up when that heat comes through. And so that allows the seeds to fall out of the cones, and a whole new stand of sand pines will germinate and start growing. But it kills the adult trees. And so not all other trees are able to withstand the fire intensity that comes through with the sand pines. So we had to go in and cut out all of the sand pines that were on this property. And the goal was to restore it to a longleaf ecosystem. So one that has longleaf pines, and here you can see that longleaf pine ecosystem is a very uneven age stand. So rather than all the trees being the same height, they are very uneven ages. You can see that there's a very open understory, and there is a lot of wiregrass in that understory, that ground layer. Frequent fire is really important for that longleaf ecosystem. And here you can see the difference between an area that's getting fire on a return of every 2 to 3 years versus every 4 to 5. So that road up the middle is our fire break. And you can see how much plant competition there is and how different the ecosystem is when you're getting that fire return interval every 2 to 3 years. And after we had been burning this area very frequently, we had a native that is endemic to Northeast Florida come up, and that is Bartram's Ixia. So this is a beautiful site to be able to see at this property. Another property that I'm going to talk about, and again, we're going to talk about fire, is Hart Island Conservation Area, and it is over in Volusia County. Similar to our procurement of the other property, this one was in a very densely planted pine system. And it is the goal of restoration on this property is to restore it to a flatwoods area. And so we did go in and thin it. And so that decreases, again, that competition for sun and for the soil and the resources in the between the trees, provides them with more opportunity for growth. Prescribed fire went into this area shortly after, and we had a lot of pine lilies that were able to come back. And although you may look at this understory in a pine ecosystem, a pine flatwood ecosystem, and think, oh, it's just a lot of grasses and palmetto, there is actually a high amount of biodiversity of plants within these ecosystems. And so it's really important to realize that. And the last property that I'm going to talk about is down in your area, in the Hal Scott Regional Preserve in Orange County. It is a beautiful property that was purchased, and prior to its acquisition, it was in cattle ranching. So in contradiction to the other two properties that were in too dense of planting, this one is at a much greater, there's a much greater distance between, so a much lower density of trees on this property. So density was not a problem. The thing that we're hoping to be able to encourage in this ecosystem is that the trees are able to get larger around, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. This property, if you are familiar with it, is co-managed with Orange County, and there are a lot of developments and neighborhoods right around this property, and some of the first FireWise certified communities. So those are going to be communities that work with their residents to ensure that they understand how to protect themselves against wildfire, were in neighborhoods neighboring Hal Scott Regional Preserve. This property has lots of longleaf pine, and we have been working in this property to increase the amount of longleaf, to increase that density with some longleaf pine planting. And one of the reasons for that is that we have a breeding and a native population of red-cockaded woodpeckers. And so we need to have enough large trees that are able to provide habitat for, or cavities for, these red-cockaded woodpeckers so their populations can continue to grow. So we manage this property in most areas with that, again, that frequent 2 to 3 year return interval of prescribed fire. This property is helping to protect the Econ River. And you can see here the Econ River actually flows right through the middle of that property. But again, some of those areas which have not been burned for long periods do require a lot more work with neighbors and with potentially different management than prescribed fire due to the proximity of residents. So here we can see a few red cockaded woodpeckers and their cavities. And you may notice that those cavities do not look like natural trees, and that is because the district has been working to provide them with some artificial cavities in trees that are smaller in diameter than they would put their cavities in themselves. And that's in an effort to increase the population and increase the diversity of red cockaded woodpeckers. So these would be some of the examples of how we could decrease the amount of undergrowth without putting in a prescribed fire. So in areas where we have very dense undergrowth and we're too close to residents, we need to be able to decrease of fire-prone material. And so we're able to use those roller choppers and decrease that abundance. We're also doing some research here to find out if using those roller choppers is more effective at increasing the diversity of palmettos and wiregrass rather than just burning. So those are a few of our properties that I wanted to highlight our land management on those. Hopefully that will spark your interest in getting out, recreating on those properties and seeing some of the beautiful sights. Remember to take your sunscreen, bug spray, and water, and keep your safe social distance. I'm going to move into water supply, so that water that we use in our homes. And that is one of our major missions, is to make sure that we have enough water supply for us and our natural systems. And so one of the ways that we do that is through our regional water supply plans. And these are reevaluated every 5 years, and they have a duration of 20 years. So for those folks that are participating from Orange County, that regional water supply plan is actually a collaboration between the South Florida Water Management District and the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and is called the Central Florida Water Initiative. And it actually has just finalized, and that draft and the period for comment just came to an end. So you should start looking into what is that water supply plan for your area if you're interested. And this water supply plan lays out how much conservation needs to be done. What are alternative sources of water? How will that funding be available? And so at the district, when we're in charge of managing how much water is being used, where it's being used, how to conserve it, how to plan for the future, it's important that we understand how much water is currently used. And so these numbers are for 2018. Our 2019 numbers are coming out next week. So I am very excited to hear about those. But for 2018, our district as a whole used 980 million gallons of fresh water a day. The private wells and public supply make up over 60%. So that is the water that we're using in our homes, in our businesses. If we have a private well, so if we have a well in our home, that's that water. So it reminds us that we have a huge role to play in water conservation. We can shrink this pie altogether by the public shrinking and decreasing its water use. Agriculture, commercial industry, and dewatering. That landscape recreation and aesthetic, that's going to be dedicated wells that have like soccer fields, golf courses, those type of things. And then of course the cooling towers with thermoelectric power generation. So if we're going to look at how we're going to need water and the demand for water, we need to know how water has been used over time. And so this graphic shows us that population, as that black line, has been increasing over time, but the amount of water that each person demands over time has decreased. This graph is always interesting to me to see how 2006 and 2000, which were drought years, caused, there was a lot greater water usage in those years, and that agriculture, you can see how their use has decreased as well. And ultimately, when we're thinking about water and the need for conservation, we do live in an area where we have an abundance of water, but not all of that water is readily available or in a form that's easy for us to drink. We use the Floridan aquifer because it is the cheapest source of clean water. So it's about $1 to $1.50 per 1,000 gallons. This is not what our utilities directly charge us, because they are having to think about those future projects, figure out their plans, and there is a certain amount of paying their staff and all of those type of things that go into it. But reclaimed, or that treated wastewater, is about $1.50 per 1,000 gallons. And as we start going to alternative supplies, so those deeper wells or surface water, so lakes or rivers, there is more in that water that has to be removed, so it gets more expensive. And ultimately, desalination, we are surrounded by the ocean, but it could be 6 to 8.5 times more expensive if we were to go to that. And then we also have all of those salts that would be generated. And so it's a good reminder that conservation is the best way to have more water available into the future, and conservation can be free. So we'll try one more poll of how much water do you think you use in a day? Do you think you use between 30 and 60 gallons, 60 to 80, 80 to 100, more than 100, or no idea? Again, that's at ttpoll.com, and the user set, or the session ID, is SJRWMD 72. So our district average is about 88 gallons a day. This was for last year. And this will all very muchly depend upon if you have an in-ground irrigation system and how you utilize that irrigation. Outdoors, our residential water use, all of the research indicates that 50% of water that's used in homes is actually used outside. And of that, half of that water gets wasted. It's either over applied and goes off through water, or over applied and just seeps through the soil. But then indoors, our toilets, sinks, and showers are those next largest contributors. So how can you save water in? Our toilets are one of our larger users. And so you can, if you're replacing your toilets, you can go for the more water conserving toilets. You may have noticed on that graphic that leaks still make up about 6% of the water that's lost. And typically that is a leaking toilet. A leaking toilet can lose about 90 gallons a day. And so you can test if your toilet is leaking by putting a few drops of food coloring in the tank, waiting, and then looking in the bowl to see if there's any water that is of color in there. So if you have some blue food coloring at home, put some blue in the back. If you see blue water in the bowl after a little bit of time, you most likely have a leaky flapper. Showers are a really huge place that water is used, and most people don't even realize it, or don't realize how much they're using. And our shower heads are going to use about 2.5 gallons a minute. So I'm learning as I work with some middle and high schoolers that really educating them about how much water their showers use, or even just maybe set a timer that you're going to turn off the hot water heater, those type of things, can encourage them to take shorter showers. So what is something that you're going to be able to do to conserve water? Can you take a 4-minute shorter shower? So that would be saving almost 10 gallons of water a shower, turning off the sink while you brush your teeth? Do you want to test your toilets for leaks, or replace old shower heads with water scents? So if you can't take shorter showers, maybe you can take, replace those 2.5 gallons a minute shower heads with ones that use 1 gallon a minute. So taking a shorter shower is always a good way to save water. So let's go into, and I'm going to skip these polling questions, but it is important to understand where your water comes from for your irrigation. There are multiple sources of that water, but if you have an irrigation system and you're utilizing that irrigation system, one of the most efficient ways to decrease your usage is to make sure that you have a functioning rainfall shutoff device. These rainfall shutoff devices are required by law if you have an in-ground irrigation system, but you really want to make sure it's functioning so you're not that person that has your irrigation system running when it's pouring down rain. Nobody wants to be that person. You can also do a few things like these 2 yards have done in having decreased areas of high volume irrigation and having your beds or those areas with some of your native plants on a different zone than your grass if you have grass. Make sure you know that we have watering restrictions year-round in our district, across Florida as well. And those are that in our district, no more than 2 days a week during the summer, during daylight savings. And don't think of that as prescriptive. Up here, I'm in Jacksonville, and we have been getting afternoon thunderstorms just about every day for the past 2 weeks. You can just turn off your irrigation and wait until your yard tells you that it needs water. So those leaf blades folding in half or leaving footprints in the water, in the grass when you walk over it. And you don't want to water in the middle of the day because that is when the most water is lost due to evaporation. So we are currently running a campaign called Watch the Weather, Wait to Water, and encouraging people to keep an eye on the weather. Think of your irrigation system as a way to supplement that rainfall. Our yards only need 3/4 of an inch every 3 to 4 days. So let the rainfall give it that 3/4 of an inch. We have a robust water quality monitoring system, and this is going to be monitoring water quality of our lakes, our rivers, our springs, our groundwater. And so if you're interested in this information, it is publicly available, and on our website, there is a great portal for those status and trends of our water quality, so that you can have a better understanding of how is the water improving in terms of water quality, or is it declining in your area, and what is that current status? Is it meeting expectations, or is it needing improvement? So since we had such issues with the last video, I am going to skip that one and move into flood protection. This is one of our district's missions that it was actually one of the reasons that the water management districts were created, and it is very important. Flood protection is accomplished by a lot of our district lands. So we do own district properties that are in proximity to the rivers and lakes, and that allows for flood protection. And I'll talk about our stormwater ponds and permitting for those as a way to help with this flood protection as well. But we also have a responsibility in maintaining these flood control areas. And so the upper basin is one area that we are able to provide flood protection with these large flood infrastructure that you can see up in the headwaters of the St. Johns. And then we also have some flood protection that's able to be offered in the Ocklawaha Basin. So those are the two main areas that we're able to manage water levels within those lakes and move water around. We are a permitting agency as well, and so there are two types of permits that we are responsible for. Those are our environmental resource permits. These are going to be everything from wetland delineation and stormwater pond construction, so making sure that no off-site flooding due to development and that new stormwater that is created. And then we're also responsible for consumptive use permitting. So large water users, agriculture, golf courses, municipal utilities are going to come to us for consumptive use permits. And we want to make sure that they are beneficial purpose. They're not going to interfere with the existing uses, and that it's consistent with the public interest. And so with that, I will take any questions that there are, and I hope that everyone has enjoyed learning a little bit more about the district.
Hi everyone, this is Valerie. I'll be getting the questions for Jennifer. Jennifer, what's your favorite district land?
So I think that my favorite is Julington-Durbin, only because of the proximity to me, and that means that I'm able to get out on it more frequently.
And what is the district doing to ensure water availability for future generations?
So those water supply plans that I mentioned are one of the tools that we utilize to ensure that water availability for future generations. It looks at a 20-year time span, so it projects water demands, population growth, and where that water would be able to come from. In situations like Central Florida, 20 years out, we know that population is projected to continue growing. Potentially the aquifer isn't going to be able to supply that water for everyone and not impact our natural systems. And so there are plans of where that water to provide for people would come from. Another one of our tools that we are required to create are our minimum flows and levels. And that is another tool that we have to understand and designate how much water a water body needs to meet its functions and for its ecology to be maintained. And so if anybody is interested in learning more about those minimum flows and levels and how we determine them, what they mean, the webinar on the 16th will be getting a better understanding, and we'll be discussing those minimum flows and levels. And so those are at the SJRWMD.com.
I will go grab a link for that webinar.
Thank you.
How does the St. Johns River Water Management District move water around in the 2 flood control areas?
So in those areas, the Moss Bluff is a dam, and so we are able to control it. So Moss Bluff was on in the Ocklawaha Basin, and it is a dam, and so we're able to open the gates to allow water to move out of that. And so in some of those lakes in that Ocklawaha system, the Army Corps of Engineers has a level that they want us to control that water level at that level. And so that's how we manage if we have the gates more open or more closed. And then there are pumps and gates as well in the headwater systems. But I will say, in a difference of historical management of flood control, where it was a very intensive pumping of water, trying to move it off of the landscape as quickly as possible. There is a much greater transitioning to utilizing our district properties, utilizing the landscape, allowing our natural systems to get that, to have that flooding that would occur naturally to occur to a greater extent. So really trying to use our landscapes more to accomplish that flood control.
That's all of the questions in the chat so far. If anybody has any additional questions.
And I'll also say that there is a webinar on the flood control that is a recorded webinar from previous times. So our previous webinars are on our website as well.
Yes, that link goes straight to the educational resources that I posted in the chat, and it has upcoming and past webinars as well.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Mandy says thank you very much. Great and informative talk.
Thank you. And I know that the Culpette Fern chapter has participated in a field trip way back when we were doing in-person things. They were able to go out to one of our district properties and get a greater amount of information from our land managers. So we definitely would be able to set something like that up at a point in time that works out for everybody if your chapter would also be interested.
Anything you'd like to end with, Jonathan?
So the last thing I do want to get out there, I'm not sure if there are any teachers or people that know teachers, but the district does have a grant program for public and charter school, middle and high school teachers to do water-related projects. Those can be conservation, they can be water quality monitoring. We are going to have a great deal of flexibility with the uncertainty of what school is going to look like in the fall, but that's for up to $2,000 per school. And that is called the Blue School Grant. And so if there are any teachers or people that have middle or high school kids that know that their teachers are looking for help funding projects like that, I hope that there will be some information given out about it. And we also have a lot of really wonderful resources on our education page for parents looking to help their students learn over the summer about our water resources.
Excellent. I've posted a link to the Blue School Grant Program in the chat.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all.
Thank you very much for coming on with us. And we appreciate all the good work you and the St. Johns River Water Management District do.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope everyone has a great night.
Bye.
Bye.